What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with reactions to the classics, and today we got a top 10 songs reactions to Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tich from our longtime supporter and patron of the channel, Evan David. Thank you, Evan David. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons that make this thing go. If you guys support us anyway, check out the Patreon link below or the Patreon link on the end screen. All right, I've never even heard of these guys, so we're going to get into some research. If you've never watched one of Evan David's reactions before, he goes in depth into research. Even if you know these guys, you're going to know more. But I'll tell you before we even start this, the music won't be in this video, but it will be at a Vimeo link below. So if you want to just click there now and follow along, I would suggest you do that. All right, here we go. I am just not really going to say these guys' name a lot because it's so long. I'm just going to say the guys. So just FYI. Rock and roll legend has it that the band that will later become known as Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tich first coalesced together in 1961 for the remnants of earlier skiffle-influenced beat groups in their hometown of Salisbury, Wiltshire, in the southwest of England, a process later described by Dave D himself, aka former police cadet David John Harmon, as follows. Quote, I was always in the bands before I left the police force, and within 2 weeks of resigning, I joined a local band, which is going to be the nucleus of our band, as a rhythm guitarist. One day the singer didn't show up for a gig and I did most of the singing. He never got back in the band. Simple as that. All right, man, the reluctant lead singer. I always like that. After struggling to make any early impact in their homeland, however, the group, by then consisting of bassist Trevor Ward Davies, aka Dozy, rhythm guitarist John Diamond, aka Beaky, drummer Michael Wilson, aka Mick, and lead guitarist Ian Amy, aka Tich, alongside the aforementioned singer and frontman Dave D, and at this point known as Dave D and the Bostons, decided to follow in the same footsteps as the Young Beatles, as well as a myriad of other budding British bands during the early 60s, and seek their musical fortunes by playing in the nightclubs of Hamburg, plus other German cities. Dave D would later describe this arduous but invaluable period in their careers as follows, quote, the money was lousy, but it was a great source of inspiration for the bands because you have to play 50 minutes on and 10 minutes off. Some days you'd play for 14 or 15 hours. I remember when out of boredom from playing the same thing every night, we got a hold of a Beatles album and played everything off it to break the monotony. All the American sailors were coming in, and that was their first taste of the Beatles. They used to come up to us and say, gee, what's that music you're playing? We used to tell them it was the Beatles, and they'd ask, who are the Beatles? Despite all this hard-won continental experience, however, and even upon eventually returning to England, they still remained far behind in the wake of some of their musical peers, with Dave D later summing up their predicament as follows, quote, we always were different. We did Hamburg along with the Searchers, Jerry and the Pacemakers, and Billy J. Kramer. But when the Beatles took off in 1962, we got left at the starting point. We were working 5 or 6 days a week, but we just couldn't get arrested when it came to record companies. You used to pile up outside the studio where there would be about 10 other bands waiting to be auditioned. They'd give you 15 minutes to set up your gear, stretch your stuff, and get out. We had comments like, don't call us, we'll call you. Gentlemen, we suggest you cut your instruments up because you'll never have a hit record. We didn't let it put us off, though, as we knew one day we would make it. In those days, you had dance halls, and we would be the support to the top of the bill. When we were on, no one would dance because there was so much going on stage, humor, action, all sorts of stuff. Indeed, it was the group's unorthodox but highly entertaining onstage presence which finally enabled them to gain their much-needed break in mid-1964, when, as Dave D again later put it, quote, we were doing a summer season at Butlin's holiday camp in Clacton, and the only way we could make money was to moonlight. We had a gig offered to us in Swindon supporting the Honeycombs. They'd just gone to #1 with Have I the Right. We went on and did the first hour, and Dennis Dell, who was the singer of the Honeycombs, then went backstage and said to their managers, Ken Howard and Alan Blakely, look, you've got to go and watch this band. They gave us their card and told us to come and see them in London. Having thus recognized the band's true potential, and despite initial missteps, it was Howard and Blakely themselves who would not only eventually mastermind the band's future chart success by composing most, if not all, of their major hits, but who would also suggest that they finally ditch their Boston's moniker and instead combine their various nicknames to form a new collaborative Uber nickname of Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tich, which I got to tell you, I mean, it obviously worked out for him, but that was a courageous move, right? Because that does not roll off the tongue. It's incredibly awkward, and I wouldn't recommend anybody do it, even though it worked for him. Dave D in the Boston seems to work better, but hey. According to Ken Howard himself, meanwhile, the reasoning behind all this was, quote, because they were their actual nicknames and because we wanted to stress their very distinct personalities in a climate which regarded bands as collectives. I see the logic there. But in any case, the result was soon to prove to be a publicity masterstroke. albeit only after the first two singles for Fontana Records under this unorthodox but unforgettable new name. No Time and All I Want sadly misfired in chart terms. Nevertheless, their third Fontana single, You Make It Move, would finally reach number 26 in the UK in November of '65, a significant feat which would, however, soon be eclipsed by their fourth single, Hold Tight, which managed to go all the way to number 3 months later. So began a 5-year musical journey which would see them notch up no less than 14 UK top 40 singles, including one UK number 1, as well as recording 5 studio albums. In the process, achieved the memorable distinction of spending more weeks in the UK top 40 between 1965 and 1969 than even their Hamburg contemporaries, the Fab Four, did, a total of 141 to 139. So it was close, but that's amazing. Such a seemingly Herculean chart feat is not as surprising as it may seem, however, moreover. For as music journalist Alan Clayton puts it, quote, while they were dismissed by many as a prime example of 1960s junk culture, they were actually an accomplished and adventurous outfit, progressing from Hold Tight with its crashing football chant beat and a sound-alike single Hideaway to the instrumental Exotica on Save Me, the risque bended and built around a Russian folk dance rhythm, Okay. Then came themed epics set in the tropics, Zabadak, Ruined Haciendas, The Legend of Xanadu, Gangland, Last Night in Soho, and The High Seas, Wreck of the Antoinette. We're going to get to a lot of those in this countdown. Discs such as these were different rather than lower league to those of more revered contemporaries such as Jimi Hendrix Experience and Cream. Indeed, Hendrix was not above after-hours jam sessions with these musicians during one of several West German tours in which BMT, as Evan David put it here, headlined over the likes of The Experience and Cream. There was a time when the quintet had no less than 5 simultaneous entries in the Federal Republics, we're talking about West Germany here, top 20, and had beaten the Beatles by more than 3,000 reader votes to win the leading German pop magazine Bravo's popularity poll in 1967. And I don't know if you remember, but the Beatles had some kind of important things going on in 1967, right? Little Sgt. Pepper's, anybody? Despite such formidable accomplishments as these, both in the UK and Germany in particular, however, not to mention success in New Zealand and Australia, Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tich were sadly never able to crack the vast US market in the same way many of their British invasion counterparts did, allegedly in large part due to the poor promotion by their US record labels, Fontana and Imperial. Although they did acquire at least one significant American fan in the shape of the future influential filmmaker, the great Quentin Tarantino, of whom more later. Moreover, the band themselves became increasingly dissatisfied with the creative dominance of their managers, songwriters Howard and Blakely, which, for all their undoubted commercial prowess, nevertheless left little room for the group's own self-written material as anything other than oft-neglected B-sides, with Dave D later explaining, quote, how Howard and Blakely would give us part of a tune and a lyric, we would take it away and tweak it in the studio. All our stuff was done in 3-hour sessions, A-side and B-side, and then we'd go in the next morning and mix it. At the time, we felt that the band was able to do more, even if those mega hits were interesting and made fun. But to get our songs on A-sides was out of the question. We were a bit naive, though, and did not realize the power of the band. 2.5 hours were spent on the A-side, so that only half an hour was left for our flip side. Moreover, however, even as a group as quirkily eclectic as Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tish can occasionally simply run out of musical steam, and such sadly seemed to be the case when Dave D chose to lead the band in 1969, later citing the fact as he saw it as, quote, I've been with the boys for 10 years, and if you live in someone's pocket for that long, it takes its toll on both you and them. I started looking for other challenges. I wanted to act, I wanted to do cabaret, and the easiest thing was to leave the band. Music has started to move on too. Bands like Led Zeppelin and Free had started to come in, and I thought for our sort of music, the writing was on the wall. In retrospect, I think we could have gone on and done some other things. Some of our B-sides were nothing like the pop singles that we made. I think we may have been able to take them on to another level. The remaining members, however, chose to keep going as D, B, M, and T, and in that guise finally began weaning themselves off of their creative dependence on Howard and Blakely, both adopting a decidedly, quote, heavier rock style in general, and eventually composing an entirely self-penned album, Fresh Air, in 1970, before finally breaking up themselves in 1973 when Mick chose to permanently retire from the music industry at the far too young age of 28. 3 years later, however, and after a brief abortive reunion with both Mick and Dave D in 1974, D, B, M, and T would reform with Pete Lucas in the role of Mick II, and after further lineup changes and intermittent sporadic reunions with Dave D up until the latter's death in 2009, which was followed itself in 2015 with the death of Dozy. Nevertheless, not only continued to release new singles until 1986, but they also remain an active touring proposition right up till the present day, with Beaky as the only remaining original member as of this writing. Evan David says, I myself have long enjoyed these guys' fun-filled music ever since first discovering them in my mid-teens during the 90s, and for much the self-same qualities that will hopefully come across well during this top 10, namely their eclectic mastery of diverse musical styles, their top-notch harmonies and storytelling skills, and above all, the quirky, eccentric style of their sense of humor, which both fits in well with my own, as well as making them a suitable subject for me to request the guys at RTTC to react to during this, the month of April Fools. Nevertheless, while I may well have concocted this list at some point regardless, I certainly wouldn't have done so for some time if it were not for the ardent recent request of fellow RTTCer and DDD BMT fan, Nicholas Urambinski, who I fervently hope will enjoy this list, as indeed I hope the rest of you will too. But regardless, I look forward to hearing your own DDD BMT top 10s in the comments below. All right, I mentioned earlier, I'm mentioning again, the music will not be in this video, but it will be in a Vimeo link, so follow on there. And as we're about to kick this off, Evan David really wanted Trey to do this. He just wasn't able to do it, so I'm doing it. I don't quite have the same sense of humor that Trey has, but I promise you, man, from the write-ups and doing all this, I'm going to enjoy it. So don't be nervous, Evan David. And you see it below. We're going to start out with Hold Tight. Now, there's going to be 7 videos in here, and this is one of the videos. I just have it down below so you can see what the song is. Evan David says, first released as a single in February 1966, whereupon it reached number 4 in the UK and later included on the band's self-titled debut album when it was released 4 months later. This literally pounding tune would owe much of its appeal to its relentless driving beat, which according to the song's producer Steve Rowland, quote, was developed because I tried to recreate the sound that my 6'5" roommate made while shagging his many women. This is where we're going to turn to maybe a PG-13 rating here, boys and girls. Because of his height, he had to loosen the headboard on his bed. Thus, it pounded against the wall in rhythm to his lovemaking. Boom, boom, boom. Can't believe I'm reading this. I can't believe you wrote this, Evan David, but let's go. I actually used a couple of pieces from that same headboard to bang together in time with the drums, creating that huge in-your-face drum sound. I used the same 2 pieces on all the subsequent titles. Later, taking on a new lease of life with this memorable inclusion in Quentin Tarantino's 2007 movie, Death Proof, one of the only Tarantino movies I've not seen. I'd like you guys to react to this clip of the tune being performed live on the legendary British children's TV show, Blue Peter, in March 1966. I'm going to guess they didn't share that story on the TV show that I just read you of how this sound came about. All right, I'm going to have the lyrics up, but we're going to watch the video, so I'll have to go back and forth. Thanks again, Evan David. All right, Hold Tight. Quite the production there, right? Turning them on the carousel. All the guitar guys, man, did not look too comfortable. That wouldn't be very fun. Drumming was nice on there. Dave D, not real good at lip syncing. I think the cinematographer, the camera people kind of figured that out early and stopped zooming in on him. But quite the production, right? This is the kind of stuff when I watch, I miss. I wish this kind of stuff was around nowadays. We had to do this stuff. I had to go back and look at the lyrics because I couldn't really understand what he was saying at the start. But basically, he just wants this girl to stay with him, right? And there is a carousel and Hold Tight carousel, and then they were spinning around the carousel. Oh, that was a nice touch. So good start. Next up, we have Tonight Today. First released as a non-album single in November 1969, but failing to chart in the UK, albeit becoming a top 5 hit in the Netherlands. This tongue-twisting travelogue of major and minor global events taking place simultaneously during the same day and night serves as a fine balancing act between the different musical and other forces shaping the band's destiny at this point. For while still written by Howard and Blakely, this first post-Dave D single also carries hints of the heavier direction in which the remaining members wish to take the band in terms of its subject matter, while still retaining much of the witty humor that had always characterized the band, albeit in a somewhat darker, if not more iconoclastic hue in the process, with the results can best be gauged by reacting to this clip of it being performed on the German music TV show B Club in December of 1969. All right, Tonight Today. Now, I don't know these guys well enough yet to whoever's singing it first, whoever's singing those low parts, I didn't really care for his voice. I thought it was a little bit distracting. It worked more later in the layering of voices. Whoever was singing the main part liked his voice, but I liked a lot of the layering of the voices in there. But the song content is pretty darn good. I'm actually read you a little bit of the lyrics. Everything flows in an endless stream. This is how it started. If we close our eyes like a vision or a dream, we'll see this world in its myriad ways. Everything flows, and every single minute brings a change to the earth and to everybody in it. Watch a million lives playing out their days. People at this very time are making many things that's so, but fools are in command. Just the different pictures they were showing, man. It's a pretty strong song and a pretty strong statement there. And I think that it's always interesting to see how these guys, we saw it with the Beatles, the most famous examples, but how quickly the look of people changed in the 60s, right? From the clean cut to now we're towards the end of the decade, the longer hair and stuff. I mean, the guys look good, but I thought that was good. All right, next up, we're going to go on a run of 3 songs that aren't videos, they're just the songs. Number 8, we got the Loos of England, first released in November 1966 as part of the band's decidedly oddly titled second album, If Music Be the Food of Love, Prepare for Indigestion, and later used as a title track for the band's first EP, which reached number 8 in the UK in February of 67. This equally oddly titled tune sees Dave D and his cohorts pay tongue-in-cheek tribute to that unsung glory of British life, namely the nation's public sanitation system. Normally, so-called toilet humor isn't really my proverbial bag per se, but when it comes to this uniquely witty tune in particular, then I'm more than happy to make an exception. Loos of England, obviously a weird subject matter, but I thought they sounded really good, right? Some different instrumentation. You can tell their talent as musicians. They basically just run down. They start off with England and they go to the U.S., Australia, Russia, Greece. They go to all these different areas talking about how the Loos are. But throughout that, I thought their musical ability really shined through, and there's some funny lines in there. So let's move on to number 7. We have Save Me, first released as a non-album single in December 1966 and reaching number 3 in the British singles charts. The frenetically insistent groove, coupled with some exciting vocal harmonies of this Latin-influenced tune, serves as a prime early example of the band's ongoing musical eclecticism, with Dave D himself later remarking that, quote, "If you listen to Save Me, we've got all the Latin percussion on it, but we didn't really know what we were doing except that it was different from everyone else." Then in 2000, the Latin influence comes in with the likes of Ricky Martin, but we'd already done it 30 years before. But I mean, there was Latin music that was huge before this, but I understand what Dave D was exposed to. He probably didn't know these things. All right, Save Me. He's basically telling the girl he loves this girl and she's not really having much to do with him, so he needs her to save him from himself, right? Because he's going a little bit crazy. So some good lines in there. I thought the diversity, the little Latin influence thing in there, an infused thing, but I thought the drumming was really good, the percussion on there, but I thought they sounded really good. And the Save Me, it was the most catchy song so far, right? I just found myself singing along to it. So that was a good choice. And next up, we have a song that's not on Spotify. I'm not watching the video, but I couldn't find the audio anywhere but YouTube. We got Nose for Trouble. It's released as part of the band's first self-titled studio album in June of 66. This outlandish musical shaggy dog story outlines various zany mishaps that his luckless protagonist is helplessly drawn into by his titular nasal appendage. And while some aspects of the humor involved might inevitably seem a bit dated by 21st century standards, the overall quirky fun of the tune itself, and indeed of the storytelling skills of the group as a whole, still makes it a very enjoyable musical as well as comedic experience to this day. All right, Nose for Trouble. A little different, a little bit of performance in there right at the start with the talking, a little bit at the end. I didn't care for the arrangement that much. I mean, it's a little bit catchy. I get it, right? I just I didn't quite care for that as much. Some pretty good lines in here. This guy gets himself into some trouble, asks this girl for something for pain, ends up out for 3 days, trying to get away from the car behind him that's tailing him, but then the sirens come on. So, I mean, the writing on it is really clever. Next up, we'll go back to videos for the rest of these. We got Don Juan, first released as a single in February 1968, where it reached number 23 in the UK, later included on the group's 4th studio album, Together. This gloriously melodramatic tune was inspired by producer Steve Rowland's long-held enthusiasm for bullfighting, having lived in Spain as a photographer for several years prior to returning to London in 1966, and aptly captures just how strong the band had become as musical storytellers by what turned out to be this late stage in their original career. And yet, while this may have turned out to be their penultimate single before Dave D quit the band later in the year, you certainly couldn't tell from the sheer sense of onstage enthusiasm conjured up by Dave and company in this clip of it performing live on the Top of Pops in 1969. Don Juan, a nice, fun performance. I thought, once again, the musicianship was great. It was very distracting. I got over it, but Dave D is not good at lip syncing, miming, whatever you want to call it. Not good at all, but I got over it. But I mean, he's all in character. He's, olaying the thing. And I like the chorus. Don Juan Braver than brave, show us today what you are. Don Juan, man among men, your name will shine like a star. The time draws very near to meet my greatest test. But with her eyes on me, I'll fight my best. He'll do it for that girl. But thought a really fun tune and really well done musically. All right, we got 4 songs left. Number 4, we got Bend It. First released as a single in September of 1966, reaching number 2 in the UK and later included on the aforementioned If Music Be the Food of Love, Prepare for Indigestion studio album. This heady musical cocktail of tongue-in-cheek lyrics and an irresistible Greek-influenced tempo is yet another delicious example of the band's ongoing musical eclecticism, with Dave D claiming at the time that they hadn't wanted to record just, quote, another thump-thump thing. We won't be angry if this isn't a hit because at least we have tried something new. Given that the songs combined UK and European sales would eventually amount to over 1 million copies, making it the band's second highest selling single after The Legend of Xanadu, which may or may not be coming up in a little bit in the process. However, such fears were clearly commercially misguided at least, despite the fact that its allegedly salacious lyrics led to many American radio stations banning the record outright, leading the band in turn to hurriedly release a new version with tamer lyrics for the stateside market. I'd like you to react to this rather bizarro clip of the original version being performed live on the Dutch TV show Moof Gaga in February 67. We know this, right? The quickest way to get people to want to listen to something or buy records is to ban it, right? I'm like, yeah, ban me, man. I mean, it happened with the Beatles. It happened with a lot of acts in the 60s, but banning them here in the States, come on, man. All right, Bend It. Definitely risque lyrics, not only for that time, but for this time. A really good performance. I like the propulsive build of this song, right? It's very interesting, the arrangement of it. Really well done. Dave D sounded good on that. The video was bizarro, not because of the guys. They were doing a good job because of the way the girls were dancing and stuff. It was just, it's kind of weird, but I guess that's the way we did it on Dutch TV back in the day. Next up, we have Zabadak. First released as a single in September of 67, reaching number 3 in the UK, as well as 52 in the US, becoming their only single to crack the Billboard Top 100, and later also included on the band's 3rd studio album, If No One Sang, in May of 68. This exotic mixture of the band's trademark harmonies with seemingly nonsensical gobbledygook lyrics, plus the whole thing being laced with real African drums to boot, all comes together to create a uniquely evocative musical atmosphere that I, for one, have always found to be strangely soothing, especially as seen in this clip of the tune being performed live on, going back to Top of the Pops, this time in 1967. All right, Zabadak. I thought the instrumentation, the arrangement, I mean, it shows the diversity of these guys and the talent they have. I can see how Evan Dave would think this is soothing. It is kind of mesmerizing, the over and over Zabadak. I think they could have done a lot more with this song if they were given better material. And I wonder if songs like this aren't what made them think like we can write better stuff than this. Verse 1, there is a little bit of like regular language here. Look for meaning, not in words, but in the way you're feeling. If it's love, we'll understand, for love is all revealing. Like a rhythm, like a spell, it sets your soul in motion. Love that sure could rule the world, a tide to turn an ocean. And then we get that Zabadak. So I want to know what Dave D was playing there, right? It looked like a giant pair of salad tongs. I mean, I don't know what he's playing there, but it's an interesting song. I don't know what to do with it. Like, I think the kind of the nonsensical part of the lyricism, I'm not really crazy about, because I just think it undersells them, because I think they are talented. Yet it does stick in my head, and it was really well done. So I don't know if this will be on my favorites or not. All right, we got 2 tracks left. We got Last Night in Soho coming in at number 2. First released as a non-album single in June of 1968 and reaching number 8 in the UK. According to producer Steve Rowland, this sinister-sounding tune originated in the fact that, quote, there's a lot of gangster activity being reported in the tabloid press here in London at the time. Much of the goings-ons were happening in Soho, people getting shot, stabbed, etc. At the time, Soho had a very seedy reputation. Sex was the first thing that sprung to one's mind whenever the place was mentioned. All of us used to spend some hours there freaking out. We gave the track a mysterious dark feel. Definitely a powerful record. Evan David says, indeed, this lovelorn gangland epic of a tune showcases the band's own formidable storytelling skills at their melodramatic, if not cinematic best. And as such, it is highly appropriate that it would also acquire a new lease of life decades later in 2021, when film director Edgar Wright, at the behest of his aforementioned friend and fellow director Quentin Tarantino, not only used it in the soundtrack of his own latest movie, a time-twisting psychological horror flick, Last Night in Soho. As such, there it seems only fitting, I'd like you to please react to this clip of the song's official promotional video. Last Night in Soho. The subject matter is he's in love with this girl, but he's hanging around the wrong area, right? Soho, and they somebody comes to him and he needs to do a job. So he kind of tells her, sorry, man, I've got to do this. So I thought the video was pretty well done. That's a long time ago. Dave D doesn't look exactly comfortable on that motorcycle, but he makes it work. But nice visuals there. And the guys in some really, especially the other four, in some really tricked out 60s garb, man. Love that part of it, man. So a well done song. All right, we're to number 1 on Evan David's Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tich top 10. We got The Legend of Xanadu. First released as a single in February 68, where it reached number 1 in the UK and also later included on the aforementioned If No One Sang album upon its own release 3 months later. The sheer irresistible impact of this literal whipcracker of a tune can be gauged by the fact that, as music journalist Alan Clayson once recalled, when Dave D was presented to the Queen Mother after a charity concert in the mid-1980s, she referred to him as the one with the whip. This was an indication of the degree to which these guys and The Legend of Xanadu and its percussive gimmick, the distinctive sound of a whip lashing during the chorus, had impinged on the public consciousness. According to the tune's producer, the aforementioned Steve Rowlands, right? Meanwhile, the whip-like sound in question was in fact achieved when I recorded a tenor mandala forwards and reversed it on tape. Then I double-tracked it, adding a wooden block and a fingernail scraping down the top E string of Tich's guitar. All this was mixed together and then reversed and spun into the master recording, something like today's sample techniques. None of the whip sounds on the finished record are the same, as we had to spin in the sample at the end of each chorus, and it never recorded onto the master the same way twice. This is how you had to get creative back in the day, right? George Martin and the boys, these guys, man, it was not easy. So I just thought that was a great part of this story. Evan David says, nevertheless, however, this exotic musical saga of dueling, daring do, and dramatically lost love in the mysterious mythical land of its title deserved to be remembered for much more than a catchy sound effect as far as I'm concerned. And while it remains a shame that these guys managed to achieve only one chart topper in their homeland, it also remains fitting that it was this tune that did so, while also becoming their highest selling single ever, selling over 1 million copies in the process, and indeed managing to top this list in turn as well. We're looking at a fan-restored video of it being performed on Top of the Pops in February of 1968. The Legend of Xanadu, number 1 on Evan David's list. That whip in there, I can see how it just becomes this earworm, and it made it very recognizable, right? The song was number 1 for 1 week. It was knocked out by Lady Madonna by the Beatles, by the way. Just another little fact in there for you. But I enjoyed it. I thought Dave D was really in character. I liked the way he was dressed. He had to have timing with the whip. And I threw some shade at him a couple times. He did really well on the lip syncing on that one. So I thought that was a good song. Once again, interesting instrumentally as well. And before I get to my closing thoughts and favorite tracks, Evan David has his usual long list of honorable mentions. So I'm going to fly through these. You Make It Move, Hideaway, DDD, BM&T. Here's a Heart, Something I Gotta Tell You, Frustration, Hard to Love You, She's So Good, Hands Off, Touch Me, over and over again, Okay, He's a Raver, The Sun Goes Down, The Wreck of the Antoinette, Run Colorado, Snake in the Grass, You Got Me on the Run, Staying With It, and Matthew and Son, as well as 2 of Dave D's solo hits, My Woman's Man and Wedding Bells. Okay, so as I get into my favorite tracks, before I get there, I'll tell you, kind of the description of this, the way Evan David had talked about it, I just kind of had this image of like kind of all this comedic stuff on there. And while it does have a little bit of that, their art is more performance art, not necessarily zany and comedic to me. And I think I could see why they wanted their own lyrics in here. I think some of these songs, while these songs are good, I mean, I liked almost every song on here, but I think they were musically more talented, right? You find it in the arrangement, the musicianship. Dave D is a fine lead vocalist, so I could see where they could have went farther, right, if they were allowed to. But my honorable mention is going to be Bend It, Zabadak, I Got to Do It because it sticks in your head, and Don Juan. My faves are going to be the last track, The Legend of Xanadu, Last Night in Soho, Save Me, and Hold Tight. All right. So thank you to Evan David for bringing this one. As he said, let us know your favorites down below. And if something didn't make it, remember, it's hard to put these top 10 lists together. So go easy on my man, Evan David, guys. And until next time, I will see you.